Hey guys, crazy developments today. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, has publicly stated that U.S. policy is no longer pursuing a Palestinian state. This is an article posted in The Guardian. U.S. ambassador to Israel says U.S. no longer pursuing goal of an independent Palestinian state. Mike Huckabee suggested that any future Palestinian state should be carved out, quote, of a Muslim country. Mike Huckabee stated that in an interview with Bloomberg, if a Palestinian state remains the goal of U.S. policy, he replied, quote, I don't think so. Any Palestinian entity could be carved out of a, quote, Muslim country rather than requiring Israel to cede territory. Unless there are some significant things that happen that change the culture, there's no room for it. Those things probably won't happen in our lifetime. Keep in mind, there are 3 million Palestinians living in the Israeli occupied West Bank. And when he was asked about that, he responded by saying, does it have to be in Judea and Samaria, referring for the biblical term of the West Bank? Also, just last week, after French officials stated publicly that France is considering recognizing a Palestinian state at the UN conference, Mike Huckabee lashed back. Take a look at what he said here. U.S. envoy says France can carve out a Palestinian state out of the French Riviera. U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, said that there is no such thing as an occupation when it comes to the Palestinian territories, and that if France is really so determined to see a Palestinian state, it can carve out a piece of the French Riviera. Keep in mind, he says there's no such thing as an occupation. There are 3 million Palestinians living in the Palestinian territories in the West Bank with an occupying force, the Israeli military, who has no association with the Palestinians. They're not the Palestinians' military. They are the military of Israel occupying the West Bank. It's just wild. But France is co-chairing with Saudi Arabia this month the international conference at the United Nations aimed at resurrecting the idea of a two-state solution, which the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu opposes. Netanyahu, for decades, even back 90s, 80s, to early 2000s, has done everything in his power to stop the recognition of a Palestinian state, which so far he's done a successful job at. There's things that we just have to take into context here. Mike Huckabee is a staunch evangelical Christian. If you know anything about evangelical Christianity, they are very, very big on the end times, and they're very big about Israel's role in the end times, what they believe is Israel's role in the end times. And for that to happen, they need the Jews to return back to Israel. That's what their biblical interpretation is, that the Jews need to return back to Israel for the rapture to happen and for Jesus Christ to return. And what's most interesting about this relationship between the evangelicals and the Jews is that it's a very one-sided relationship. They believe that the Jews need to return to Israel, and if they don't accept Jesus Christ, then the rapture is going to happen and they're going to be damned to hell. If you're a Jewish person and you have these evangelical Christians that are very supportive of Israel, but deep down you know that the reason they support Israel is because they're hoping you get damned to hell unless you accept Jesus Christ, then you're probably not going to really like them that much. And that's exactly why you have these polls that you see when it comes to favorability from Jews to evangelical Christians and vice versa. This is a Pew Research Center poll taken back in 2022 showing net favorability among different religions. Jews have a negative 40 net favorability among evangelical Christians, while evangelical Christians have a positive 39, about positive 40 net favorability of Jews. So evangelical Christians very much so like Jews, while Jews very much so dislike evangelical Christians. I wouldn't like a group of people so much either if the only reason they were helping me out is because they were trying to hasten my eternal damnation to hell. Now, here's another really interesting poll as well, and it was taken back in 2013. And it's asking the question, was Israel given to the Jewish people by God? And it's asking the question among different religions. The net Jewish view on that question is 47%. 47% of U.S. Jews believe that the Jewish people were given Israel by God. Obviously, among different sects of Judaism, that's different. Modern Orthodox, 90% of them believe that Israel was given to them by God. However, Jews of no religion, so ethnically Jewish people that do not have a religion, only 16% of people do so. Now, the US general public, 44%, 55% of Christians. However, if you look at the breakdown, 82% of evangelical Christians believe that God gave the Jewish people the land of modern day Israel. Mike Huckabee falls into that 82%. When you look at US support for Israel, 44% of US Americans, at least back from 2013, believe that God gave the land to Israel. That definitely plays a role in US support for Israel. And this is the thing that people need to understand as well, is this didn't happen randomly. This was a very intentional concerted effort going all the way back to the early 1900s, pushing the Zionist agenda, the Zionist campaign into churches, into the US public discourse, into the news outlets, into the media. This goes back way early on. This goes back to the Schofield Bible, the 1908 publication of the Schofield Bible that was heavily dispersed among evangelical Christians. And it tied into this dispensationalist view of Christianity where God gave the land to the Jews. And that's really where the beginning of Zionism in evangelical Christian America started. And we're feeling the effects of it still to this day. Crazy stuff. I think that what's going to happen here is we're just going to naturally notice more of U.S. isolation on the international arena. It's so interesting to see that the United States is willing to drop every single one of its allies for Israel. The United Kingdom, France, every single one of its European allies, every single one of its allies in general is willing. The U.S. will drop for Israel. A lot of it also has to do with the fact that so many of our politicians are just simply bought out by Zionist interests. We have APAC, we have Christians United for Israel. So many the Israel lobby is so strong in this country. This is another thing to keep in mind. The more that Israel tries to annex the West Bank, the more that Israel does not allow for a Palestinian state, the more the conversation of a one state solution just naturally starts to rise, because you can't have 3 million people in the West Bank treated as second class citizens. If Israel decides to annex the entire West Bank, you now have 3 million Palestinians without Israeli citizenship living in what is now considered Israeli territory. That's by definition apartheid. The only reason some people argue Israel is not an apartheid state is because Israel hasn't formally annexed the West Bank. However, Israeli citizens are living in the West Bank among Palestinians who do not have Israeli citizens, who do not have Israeli citizenship, and do not have access to the same roads, to the same groundwater. They're not allowed to carry weapons while Israeli settlers are. That's by definition apartheid, but it hasn't been formalized. But the second that Israel decides to annex the West Bank, then that's a whole different conversation. So I think long term this is going to hurt Israel's interests. We'll see how things continue moving forward. The UN conference on the two-state solution is coming up. It's going to be June 17th to the 20th. So it's just going to be next week. We're going to see how things go then. I'm definitely going to be reporting on it. Make sure to shoot me a follow. Click the subscribe button below if you want to see more of my videos, and I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, guys. I'll see you guys later. Bye.